Hello and welcome to DM It All, a show where we talk about D&D books and tabletop gaming history. For this episode, we'll be taking a look at another module, but one on a much smaller scale than the Temple of Elemental Evil, or even the Tomb of Horrors. Today, we'll be reviewing Against the Cult of the Reptile God. Unlike most of the other adventures we've covered, the Cult of the Reptile God does not really have any sequels or adaptations. There is 4th edition's Against the Cult of Chaos, but that adventure is essentially a hybrid of multiple low-level modules, including Hamlet and the Keep on the Borderlands. For the most part, this adventure only exists for 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but it is still considered one of the greatest D&D adventures of all time. We've already discussed the author of this module, Douglas Niles, in our Dragonlance reviews, but this adventure is actually how Niles first became associated with Dungeons & Dragons. As we mentioned in our Dragonlance videos, Douglas Niles learned about D&D when he was working as a school teacher. Gary Gygax's daughter Heidi was one of his students, and she introduced him to the game. After Heidi gave Niles a copy of D&D Basic, Niles started up his own home group campaign. One of his players eventually went on to work for Dragon, D&D's official magazine. This friend encouraged Niles to apply for a few open positions at D&D's publisher, TSR. Niles was hired as a game designer in 1982 and was handed a design brief for a low-level campaign. The design brief was created by an editor named Kevin Hendricks and was originally intended as an addition to the Secret of Bone Hill module. But the concept was rejected by Bone Hill's writer, so Hendricks decided to create a standalone adventure instead. Unfortunately, he was fired from TSR in 1981 when the company purged a lot of its creative talent and transitioned to a more corporate atmosphere. In 4 weeks, Niles took Hendricks' notes and created his first and arguably best D&D adventure, Against the Cult of the Reptile God. As always, there will be spoilers within this review. If you want to just hear our final thoughts on this module, jump ahead to the time shown here. Even the name of the book is technically a spoiler due to the investigative nature of this module. If you run this adventure, we recommend you avoid revealing the title and the cover. The only thing the party should know at the start of this adventure is that something strange is happening within the humble village of Orlane. Orlane is a small farming town in the Greyhawk setting that stands at a crossroads between 2 cities. It was built around a temple to the goddess of agriculture, Marika. It's a name that sounded a lot less silly when this module first came out in the early 80s. The temple was initially built because the land in the area was surprisingly fertile. Surprising because the area is surrounded by a spooky forest to the north and a dense swampland to the south. Orlane existed as a thriving community until the past year or so, when the population started seeing a rapid decline. Some farmers simply abandoned the area, while others began mysteriously disappearing. A number of vanished villagers ended up returning after a week or so, but their personalities were radically changed, making them noticeably more distant or angry. A new aura of secrecy and hostility now permeated the once friendly farming village. The module begins with the party hearing some rumors about Orlane in the nearby city of Hokuk. Some of these rumors are true, but the party might also pick up some false rumors as well. Orlane is very reminiscent of the village of Hamlet, as it too is a standard farming village, and the focal point of a low-level D&D adventure. Like Hamlet, Orlane has a complete map of the town, and features significant details for most of the buildings. But unlike Hamlet and most early TSR adventures, this book gives a much stronger incentive for learning about the town and its people. The main reason for this is that there's obviously something wrong with the village of Orlane, and the party's goal is to find out what's happening. Hamlet also required the DM to come up with all the story events, but this module provides some scripted moments that set up interesting scenes. For example, the first house that the party sees upon entering the village will have a teenage girl churning butter on the porch. The girl will immediately run into her house as the party approaches. Her father will step out to talk with the party, but he will refuse to allow them entry into his home. Through the windows, the party will be able to see the rest of his family peeking out beneath the window curtains. Inside, the man's son will prepare to attack if the party tries anything funny. So the party will quickly learn that this family's behavior is far from uncommon in this town. Everyone seems to be living in fear of each other, and no one will tell the party why. While the title does spoil the nature of the threat inside of Orlane, there is still a lot for the players to learn about this mysterious cult of the Reptile God. The cult is basically aiming to kidnap everyone in town and transport them to their main base. They do this by either converting the villagers or killing them. The party needs to find out which townspeople are cultists and how to stop their plan. Meanwhile, the villagers that have been converted to the cult will want to learn more about the party in turn. Cult members have a slavish devotion to their religion, as well as excellent coordination with other cult members, so any information divulged by the heroes will likely be used against them. This creates an interesting dynamic because the party will want to interrogate townspeople without giving away too much information in return. They will also not want to act too boldly against cultists without gathering evidence, as it will only turn the entire village against them. Most of the non-cultists do not understand what has happened to their town, but they will be able to point out the more suspicious villagers in shady locations. To complicate things further, there is no universal way of knowing which townspeople to trust, as many honest villagers have become more hostile to strangers in the recent months. Some cultists will also pretend to be helpful to set the party up for a potential ambush. There are several red herrings within the town in order to mislead the party. One of them is an old hermit that lives in the nearby grove. Orlane's mayor in particular is convinced that this elderly loner is behind the town's problems. The mayor might direct the party towards this suspect, but he is also doing his own separate investigation into the matter. He has recruited 2 elves he met during his days as a fighter to help him in this goal. These elves are outsiders to the village and serve as another red herring. Most of the villagers are suspicious of them because they're strangers with no interest in befriending anyone. They will even refuse to work with the party, regardless of whether or not they are convinced of the party's noble intentions. Instead, they will be doing their own sleuthing, which means the party might see this questionable duo skulking around at night in places where the cult is known to gather. Despite the mayor's suspicions, the old hermit is not involved with the cult and is actually the best ally the party can acquire. His name is Ramney, and he has been observing the cult this entire time from his small grove. Not only that, Ramney is also a level 7 magic user, but he won't reveal this information at any point. The module admits this so that the party does not rely too much on this mid-level NPC. He is mostly here as a panic button for the dungeon master in case the players are in severe danger. The cult has gotten pretty good at kidnapping people, and there's a decent chance the heroes will end up captured too, especially if they are too open about their intentions and where they're heading. If the entire party is kidnapped, the DM is recommended to use one of the allies in town in order to help the heroes. These include Ramney, the mayor, and a retired ranger living in town. The party should try to solve the mystery as soon as possible, because a lot of potential allies might end up being captured by the cult. A lot of D&D modules have reactive or static enemies, but the reptile cult will carry out their plans regardless of the party's involvement. The ticking clock in this module is very forgiving, but it still adds a lot to the tension, and is guaranteed to keep the party on their toes. There are only 3 locations in Orlane that are important enough to have interior maps: the Temple of Marika and 2 separate inns. Orlane originally had a 3rd inn known as the Foaming Mug, but it was abandoned after the cult killed its denizens during a failed kidnapping. If the party visits the Foaming Mug, they will be attacked by troglodytes that have been hiding out in the abandoned building. Troglodytes being the smelly race of lizardmen that are so odious that they nauseate their opponents in melee combat. These reptile people were past adversaries of Orlane and are now working with the cultists. The Slumbering Serpent Inn, on the other hand, is still a thriving location despite the conditions within Orlane. Players might view this place with suspicion based on the name alone, but nothing bad actually happens here. What the party should be more wary of is the Golden Grain Inn. If a party accepts any of the drinks at the Golden Grain Inn, they will be drugged and captured by the cult. If the party decides to sleep at the inn, they will be attacked in the middle of the night by cultists. This assault will be led by one of the clerics from the nearby Temple of Marika. This cleric will cast a spell of silence on the room containing the sleeping party members, muting any potential characters on night watch. The cultists will then enter through secret passages in the wall and silently kidnap the characters, or subdue them by force. The party can break into the inn in order to perform an investigation, which creates a great infiltration scenario. The plot will thicken as the party reaches the basement and notices a series of dirt tunnels beneath the building. These narrow tunnels are where prisoners are kept before being brought to the cult's central base, but there will probably be nothing of value here when the party investigates. The main exception is an ivory Naga statue hidden in one of the paths. Nagas are an intelligent reptile race with the head of a human and the body of a snake, and this statue is a good hint for what the party is in for. The local temple has a lot more going on in comparison, and is more like a proper dungeon. For one thing, there are more enemies, as the heroes will have to make it past a number of temple servants. These used to be monks and clerics for the goddess Marika, but they now serve the cult. There are underground tunnels below this building that are very similar to the tunnels from the inn, both in terms of appearance but also function, since they also don't serve much of a purpose outside of storing prisoners. In fact, there is even an unsolvable maze in this location that the party can't reach the end of. Literally, the writers and editors forgot to make an exit to this maze. It's like the module was written in 4 weeks or something. The party is better off heading towards the temple's second floor instead. Here they will encounter some skeletons as well as some goblins from the nearby woods. Goblin tribes such as these used to perform raids on the village of Orlane, but they have been strangely absent in the past couple months. That's because the reptile cult has been working to recruit the goblins, though the cult mostly uses these humanoids to feed their pet reptiles. At the very end of this floor, the party will encounter this adventure's mini-boss, a former cleric of Marika named Abramo. Abramo has basically gone insane, and the party will find him scribbling gibberish on the walls. He will flee as the party approaches, and will duck behind a secret door. If the party finds this secret area, they will see Abramo standing next to some crude reptile statues, as well as a cage. Abramo has captured a local girl named Cyrilli, and has kept her as his personal prisoner for the past 3 months. If the party frees the girl, she will reveal herself to be the daughter of the local storekeeper. Her family was taken to the cult's main base, and brought before the cult's leader, a Naga. The cult of the Reptile God is not serving an actual god, but instead a crazed lizard lady that fancies herself as a deity. The Naga is known as Explictica Defilis, which is a name that's as hard to pronounce as it is to take seriously. Defilis is specifically a spirit Naga, an evil Naga species with a hypnotic gaze. Any humanoid that meets her eyes will be permanently charmed by the monster. They will view the Naga as a close friend and seriously consider any suggestions she makes, outside of clearly suicidal actions. The main exception to this are the AD&D elves, as they are 90% immune to charm effects. It's probably the main reason why it's recommended the party has at least one elf for this adventure. But most humanoids do not share this immunity, which is why Defilis has been able to turn the local populace into her cabal of devoted followers. Cyrilli's family was converted by the Naga, while she was the only one able to resist the charm effect. Cyrilli will be able to confirm for the party that the Naga's lair is not within the village. That means the heroes will have to leave Orlane to track the monster down. The wizard Ramney will offer to join the party as they prepare to leave the village, but he still won't reveal his class or his level, so the party will just see this incredibly slow and fragile old man asking to tag along. To reach the lair, the party will have to track the footprints of the cultists through the nearby dim forest, a spooky woodland area common in RPG settings. It features a thick canopy of trees that blocks all sunlight, hence the name. After 2 days of journeying through this forest, the party will enter the Rushmoors, a massive swampy area that is home to the Naga's lair. This portion of the module is a lot more of a standard dungeon crawl than the first half, but at least the concept behind the dungeon is unique. Its entrance is a hole in the ground, surrounded by levees made of mud and wood that keep out the swamp water. Understandably, the dungeon is filled with running water and mud everywhere. There are many locations where the mucky floor slows character movement and alerts nearby enemies. There are also locations that are inundated with water, as the levees are the only thing keeping the dungeon from fully flooding. The party will need to steal some small boats from the cultists in order to navigate these water-filled areas. If the party tries to destroy the levees and flood the dungeon completely, the troglodytes inside will be alerted to the party's presence and hunt them down. Note that the trogs can maneuver through the swamp way better than the party can. Inside of the dungeon, the party will encounter a lot of troglodytes and some of their pet crocodiles and snakes. The party will also encounter possessed villagers from Orlane, as well as some standard dungeon creatures that have snuck into the cult's location. These include large spiders, giant rats, a carrion crawler, and even a harpy. The harpy lives in her own section of the dungeon that has been deemed off-limits by the troglodytes. Inside this harpy area is a hallway filled with deep mud. Characters can become charmed by the harpy's song and forced to wade through the muddy corridor. The mud is deep enough that anyone wading through it will eventually become stuck. The harpy will then blind any immobilized party members by using a dagger. This is to make them helpless as she tortures and eats them. Even if the heroes attacked by the harpy manage to escape, they will still be permanently blinded, making this an early retirement either way. If the party is able to kill the harpy, they will at least be rewarded with some treasure. This is a big deal in this adventure, because the cultists back in Orlane have given away most of their valuables to the Naga. Remember that AD&D characters basically need treasure to acquire experience points, meaning that it's very unlikely any character will reach level 2 until they complete their quest. And since there's no reward for most of these encounters, the party will feel underpowered in both gear and levels. That's why finding the cult's treasure rooms in this dungeon should hopefully put some spring in their step. One treasure room is on the dungeon's first floor, and the party will have to venture deeper into the second floor to find the other 2 rooms. The second floor is also where the party can rescue some trapped villagers in a nearby prison area. The captured villagers are waiting to be brought before the Naga in order to fall under her charm effect. If the victims manage to resist, they will either be fed to the crocodiles or turned into zombies. The latter process takes place in a room that is literally known as the Zombie Factory. The newly created zombies then get sent to the pump room, where they spend their afterlife mindlessly pumping all the excess water out of the dungeon. The zombies and other undead are created by Gareth Primo, the Naga's personal cleric. Unlike the other humans, Gareth is truly evil and a devoted follower of the Naga. He serves as another mini-boss, and is reinforced by a nearby undead monster known as a wight. If you know anything about AD&D wights, you know this is a cruel addition to a low-level adventure. Wights made characters level down whenever they successfully landed an attack, and going below level 0 in AD&D meant a character could never level up again. Level 0 was usually reserved for NPCs, making this another path toward early retirement. Not only that, but the party needs silver and magic weapons to even be able to damage this thing. In an adventure, mind you, with barely any magic weapons. To add insult to injury, characters the wight reduced below level 0 would immediately die and come back as wights, making the situation even more impossible. And don't forget that there's an evil cleric casting Hold Person on various party members to make them easy targets. This isn't even the only undead monster in this dungeon that can only be damaged with magic weapons either, so it's best to be prepared for a party wipe as players crawl through this nasty dungeon. Especially because the Naga's lair is also nearby. The party can find a secret entrance to it in Gareth's dark altar room if they search around, but if not, they'll need to loop around to the main entrance. This passage will be filled with water, so the party will need to use one of the nearby boats. The Naga will be resting on her own little peninsula covered with skulls and treasures. As the party approaches in their humble boat, she will shoot a fireball at the heroes. This is where Ramney will reveal himself as a magic user. He will put up a force field to block the fireball and counteract with a lightning bolt spell. The boat will eventually reach the Naga's peninsula, and a melee fight will break out. If the party heeds Cirili's advice, they'll have to keep their eyes closed while battling the Naga in order to avoid being charmed. Ramney can dispel the charm effect, but he can only do so one time as a panic option. The good news is that the charmed party members will not fight their friends as the Naga is arrogant and does not believe she needs their help. She's roughly a level 9 opponent battling a level 1 party, so she might be right. She has access to level 2 spells, as well as a poison bite that can insta-kill a character. If the party manages to survive the fight and kill Dephilus, her hold on all the villagers will die along with her. The possessed villagers will only have vague memories of what they did under the Naga's control. The Troglodytes will still fight the party though, since they were never charmed to begin with, they just hate humans. Afterwards, there will be a period of adjustment for Orlane, as everyone comes to terms with what has happened. But in a month or so, the town will eventually return back to the friendly village it once was. The module gives some suggestions for further adventures in Orlane as a sort of epilogue. Orlane is surrounded by a lot of hostile territory, and the DM can take advantage of that for future plots. It's a nice touch, since entry-level modules like this should serve as starting points for newbie DMs to make their own adventures. Against the Cult of the Reptile God is a terrific module in general, thanks to the very strong first half centered around Orlane. There are many D&D adventures that revolve around mysteries, but often the mysteries are either bare bones or they rely too heavily on scripted events. This module, on the other hand, gives the party a lot of information to gather, as well as total control over how they do that. The module plays out more like a sandbox adventure, as no location is mandatory barring the final dungeon. In fact, the party can theoretically open the adventure by exploring the dim forest and skipping the town portion altogether. It is a pretty suspicious location after all. Despite the open nature of this adventure, it still manages to inspire some interesting roleplay. Events that would be forgettable in any other campaign, like finding an inn to rest at, become tense scenarios here. The party will want to play out every step of their visit to the local inns and nearby stores. They'll also need to be conscious of their actions, and they will often be forced into some difficult scenarios. And the fact that the cultists are under mind control will also add some challenging moral questions to their journey. The second half of this module is strong, but it's more of a standard D&D adventure. It probably would have been more interesting to at least put the final dungeon in Orlane, so the party could have the cult on their tail until the very end. The most glaring issue with this adventure, though, is probably the wizard Ramney. He helps make the final boss feel more cinematic, but it's pretty lame to have the party's survival hinge on taking this NPC along, because that Naga fireball is practically guaranteed to kill a level 1 party without Ramney's force field. The fact that Ramney can dispel the Naga's charm creates some issues with the narrative too, since wizards gain new spells every day. If you think about it, Ramney could easily load up on dispel effects and slowly free all of the charmed villagers in town. The old wizard is often one of the most house-ruled elements of this module because of this. The module does suggest giving the party some magic scrolls if Ramney doesn't tag along, and this should probably be the default approach for most dungeon masters. You'll need to somehow inform the party about the Naga's fireball ability, but this is still better than giving them a babysitter that does most of the heavy lifting. Against the Cult of the Reptile God deserves its status as a classic adventure, although it does have a handful of notable flaws. Most of them reflect the era in which this module was created, as this book serves as a bridge between the old school sandbox modules and more modern scripted adventures. It has some minor railroady elements, but for the most part the players are the ones that determine the twists and turns in the plot through their actions. This module is also a decent teaching tool for new dungeon masters, despite its rather brutal difficulty. It explains a lot of D&D mechanics within its pages, while also providing a compelling narrative. Orlane is a great home base for a custom campaign too, especially if the campaign opens with this adventure. The villagers and their homes are well detailed, and the party can become well acquainted with everyone thanks to the nature of the plot. This is a mystery adventure at its core, and players will be rewarded for interrogating NPCs, infiltrating locations, and coming up with plans of action. It is perfect for players looking for a different style of D&D adventure, while also yearning for that classic dungeon crawling action. After all, it is still a low-level D&D adventure focused on a farming village. It's a unique module that shows the potential of story-driven plots, while still highlighting the strengths of player-driven sandbox adventures. This tasteful blend of two flavorful styles is why this humble module has a legacy that persists to this day. Thank you for watching DM It All. As always, let us know what you think down in the comments. If you like this video, please like and share it too. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to stay updated on all our upcoming videos. You can also support the show through our Patreon and get access to all our episodes early, as well as the ability to vote on future episodes. Thank you all for your support, and we'll see you all next session.